I'd like to welcome Arielle Lechner. She is a seasoned executive coach and founder of NewPO, a boutique coaching firm specializing in transformational leadership. Her work focuses on helping clients navigate high stakes challenges and achieve transformational results, blending deep leadership psychology with actionable business growth strategies for CEOs and founders and senior leaders. Welcome, Arielle.
Thank you for having me on, Darshan.
So I'm curious, maybe we can start from the beginning and you can talk about your journey because you worked with a lot of leaders across industries and stages from founders to senior executive. What initial aha moments led you to become an executive coach?
Yeah, so before I became an executive coach, I was leading go-to-market strategy mostly for B2B SaaS and Web3 companies. So, taking positioning, messaging, taking products to market. It was very interesting work, but I found myself longing for more depth, launching products that thousands and potentially millions of people could use was interesting. But I think I really noticed a desire to work more with people. I really started getting interested in why do some leaders and founders thrive while others, don't? Why are some teams at certain companies, if they're larger, um, thrive while others are getting stuck? And I just became really interested in that. Real catalyst, I think, for me was one of the last jobs, in-house jobs I had, was I joined a company that grew so quickly. Within a year, we had doubled in size. And that quick growth really highlighted whatever like cracks were in the foundation, like you saw them now. There's no hiding it. I really got a front row seat to see different teams were working in different ways at this company, and some were working well and others really weren't. And that really kind of became a catalyst for me that launched me into what I'm doing now, executive coaching, because I really became more interested in working with the people that are building these things that are, then taking these products and so forth to market.
And so that was I'm trying to think, it sounds like there was a really kind of an aha moment that said, the people side of it interests you more than the actual execution for you anymore.
Yeah, well, it's people building products. I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a world in the future where AI is building everything, who knows? But um, you can have a great idea and you can have the talent uh to build it, but if the team dynamics, the culture, the leader who's leading the team, all these different ingredients that make the machine function, um, then it doesn't matter how talented the people are and how great the idea is, like things aren't going to get built. And so I just became a lot more interested in having an impact in that way, like having a more deeper impact on people, who are the ones then, building all kinds of things that are hopefully making our world better.
Mhm. So was there a direct line from that to being a coach, or was there some other things in between that kind of shaped and direct you here and there, and then you got to coaching?
I spent some time consulting, like still doing go-to-market consulting, um, mostly because what I will say with coaching is you're a lone wolf, for a lot of the time, right? You're working on your own mostly with clients. And I did enjoy still working with teams. Plus, there's something to be said about still having like boots on the ground and being in it, working with a variety of different teams through consulting. Really, yeah, just, when I was in house, you stay places for a couple of years, but when you're consulting, you can see a lot of different companies, cultures, ways of working, problems, types of leaders. And I think that still let me keep my one foot um, in the water, so to speak, with like working with teams and being immersed in a team, but also gave me the flexibility to not be in house and, grow my coaching practice. Also because, I have a referral based business. And so I couldn't just leave what I was doing before and all of a sudden have a full practice. That doesn't work. And so it took me a couple of years to like build up a flywheel of referrals. And so in that time, I was doing consulting as well. And I'm grateful for it because it exposed me to a lot of different types of leaders and cultures, ways of working, which has enriched what I bring to client conversations today.
I'm sure, yeah. So I'm curious, when you got into coaching, what are the top three things that really surprised you?
One main thing is coming to mind, and it's that even the sharpest, most accomplished, intelligent, capable people, imposter syndrome, doubt, want to avoid difficult things. And it's just, I think what I've come to know in my bones is that this is just a very part of the human experience. And it doesn't matter how smart or how accomplished these shadows still show up for folks. Um, and, to different degrees with different types of people, right? Not everyone's exactly the same, but these are definitely a common thread that I've seen throughout my clients, older and younger, male, female, it really doesn't matter. Um, and yeah, helping people notice that and decide if they want to choose something different.
So I want to clarify something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but coaching doesn't mean you tell people or make decisions for them. More than anything, you're actually trying to, I think, first find those shadows, right? To address them and then help and guide them with their decision making. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, thank you for calling that out. So, coaching is not consulting, right? When you're a consultant, you're being paid to offer, well, here's my point of view. Here's what I think you should do. And like the client will either take your advice or not, but you're being paid for your advice. As a coach, I don't want to say I never give advice. And maybe I'll get a tap on the wrist for this because in a coaching, most coaches say you should never give advice. I believe that in certain contexts where I feel like it could be helpful, I will share advice, but I preface it with that, take this with a grain of salt. Here's a different way to think about it. But generally, I am not offering advice because I'm not an expert in this person's business. I'm not an expert in, a variety of things that have to do with their business. What I am an expert in is helping my client, who is like an executive, a CEO, a senior leader, see the way they think, which is very difficult to do on your own for you to really understand how you think. So I'm helping them see the way they think and then helping them figure out like, is this serving you? Is this helping you create the result you want? And if not, how can we think differently? And what's the path to or quest towards that? So that's really, I think it's an important distinction with coaching. It's helping clients it's helping them hold up the mirror is what I would describe with coaching, is helping them see their blind spots versus, consulting is just a lot more, here's what I think you need to do.
But I think, am I correct that you often need to find those shadows first so that they can be addressed to then basically be able to help them? Because if you don't, those shadows are still going to be the big roadblock.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. So mostly, I mean, I should say never, but typically people are coming for coaching because something's not quite right, or they're not getting the result they want, or whatever. They're running into some problem. And they may, come and say, hey, I'm struggling with like decision making, or I don't feel like I have clarity on this, or delegation, or my team's not right, or whatever the presenting problem is. And I think what we uncover very quickly in coaching is, okay, this is the presenting problem, but like, what's the upstream problem? What is, these are the downstream problems, but there's this higher up problem that if we could solve that, all these other problems that are showing up wouldn't be problems anymore. And that's typically like the shadow or the thing they're unconscious of that is actually running the show. A way to maybe like an example of this would be like I see this a lot because I tend to work with more earlier stage founders, so like seed stage, Series A. And what I notice, what's very common there is, you start a company or maybe, you and your co-founders, your team of 3, 5, like you're small. And all of a sudden, you've raised your first round, then you raise Series A, and now, your company's growing to 40 people. It's a big shift. And I think one of the shadows here that I've noticed for a lot of clients is in the beginning, they are in the weeds, right? With the CEOs, the founders are in the weeds with the team. They are really immersed in building and executing. And as the company grows and scales, that's actually, it starts to not serve them in the same way. And they need to kind of start showing up more like a CEO and an executive rather than just a builder. And that's kind of like an identity shift, right? Because a lot of people equate the value they provide, and we're kind of trained this way through school and even like our early career, is my value is my output. So like tangible thing that I'm shipping equals how good or valuable I am. And when you're a CEO or a leader, and I'm sure like this, you're actually being paid for how you think. Like the value you create is how you think, the time you spend thinking, and it's you still execute, but it's less about these tactical things. And I think like that is a shadow or like an identity shift that I see a lot with clients, is having to make that shift. There's resistance. It's a difficult transition, but it's an important transition. And so, to come back to your question, this initial presenting problem, that's typically what I'm helping clients see, is like the what's underneath the hood of what's getting in the way of them creating what they want. And then we figure out like, okay, this is what you want to create. This is how you need to show up to create that, who you need to be. This is how you're currently showing up. This is how you're currently behaving. Where's the gap? Like, let's look at that gap. And now let's go on a quest together to kind of bridge that gap. And it's not a clear shot, right? Because this isn't some like, oh, let's reverse engineer this identity to that identity. It's a lot of experimentation and trial and error and trying things on, and 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's really the way I like to frame it to clients is we're going on a quest together, so that you can, yeah, put these shadows like front and center so they're not subconsciously running the show, and help you create what it is you really want.
In fact, I think you have to go into the subconscious with them to get to that shadow and offer the shadows probably in much early in their lives, right? And it's been kind of sitting there, and then you almost have to become a bit a psychologist to help them get there. And when they you get there and help them overcome it, then I think the things move a lot faster and flow. And ultimately, I think you're right. It's not, but I'll maybe push it one more thing. You said it's about the thinking, but I think ultimately it's more about the decision making, right? That I think as you get higher up, and it sounds like I think what you're saying is a lot of times people love the creative phase and everybody's in it's creating, but then after that, once it's created, you have to go in the building phase, and that's different. That's a different challenge.
Yeah, the building is a different challenge. But I also think like even when you're building, like yes, decision making, but in order to make quality decisions, you need time to really think. And I think one of the other things I notice with like CEOs is as things grow, the company grows, which is great, but there's also more demands on the CEO. It gets some struggle with still carving out what I would call like CEO time, where you're spending time thinking, not just about like what needs to happen with the company, but hey, is who I am today what the company's going to need in 6 months? Like, what does the company need? Where's the company need to be in 6 months? And like, am I equipped to take it there? What am I missing? How do I need to change how I'm spending my time and stuff like that?
Yeah. And have you found, I mean, I know this is going to be a generalization, but have you found that there's 3 tips you could probably give most CEOs that would really benefit them?
Great question. Let's see. The first one that comes to mind is turn towards the thing you're avoiding. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, a lot of time people are looking for, hey, I'm not quite sure what to do. Help me get to clarity. And so often, what I like to say is discomfort. The discomfort is the compass. So the thing you're avoiding and putting off and like, dragging your feet on is most of the time exactly what demands your attention right now. Like that is the next step. And the sooner you turn towards that, the sooner you're going to learn some new piece of information, the sooner you're going to be able to act on it, which makes, you're increasing your velocity of learning. And so just if you could just stop avoiding things and just turn towards the thing you're feeling some discomfort around, I think that already creates like momentum and so much impact. The other tip is really shifting your mindset around, especially when you're pre-product market fit, around what it means to quote unquote fail. So I deeply believe that there's no such thing as failure. There's only lessons. As long as you are running tight experiments with quick feedback loops. When you think about like a scientist who's running experiments, imagine when they run an experiment and it doesn't go the way they hoped, they don't say, "Oh crap, like I'm an awful scientist." They say, what was wrong with like the container here? What variable do I need to shift? Like let me tweak this and then try it again. And they don't make the failure mean something about them. They just get more curious and dialed into what do I need to change here? And that mindset as an entrepreneur makes you unstoppable, because when something doesn't work out or go the way you would have planned, you don't get stuck in a narrative of, oh, I'm not enough, I'm not equipped. Rather, you're able to then more quickly figure out, well, what's the insight or lesson here? And how can I adjust my hypothesis and run this experiment again? And again, coming back to this idea of increasing your velocity of learning. So that's second tip. Third tip, pay attention to your gut and intuition. I think the third thing I often see with clients is they have a gut instinct around an employee, an investor, whatever it is. And then they try to come up with reasons of why that's instinct is wrong, or, yeah, but this, or they did that. And they try to explain away whatever they're noticing is or sensing is problematic. And 99% of the time, this thing comes back to bite them in the butt. And 99% of the time, it's this insight that, wow, I should have parted ways with this person then. Why did I, allow this to go on for so long? And I think the reason for this is folks have doubt, right? They're wondering, like, am I making a mistake? This and that. But 99% of the time, I really think like you're having this instinct for a reason. You're observing a pattern. Your instincts are there to help you make quicker decisions, even if you can't always pinpoint exactly why you're having this reaction. So follow your gut and instincts as much as you can.
You make a lot of good points there at 1, 2, and 3. And I'm curious on number 2. I think that's something that's really important, because what you're saying is that it's really the definition of failure, right? Because if you do something and it doesn't go the way you want, and if you learn from it, it's not a failure. It was a learning exercise. However, if you don't learn anything from it, that's what becomes the failure.
Yep, that's what becomes the failure. And I mean, then that's when it becomes really unfortunate. So if you can really lock into, again, running a tight experiment, figuring out, what is a suboptimal outcome and when will I know? And then making sure you distill. I guess the other piece that's important here is making sure you're pulling away the correct lesson, right? What's the correct insight here? We can sometimes take away the wrong lesson because of, certain stories we have, like for, I'll give a silly example here, like, and a super simple, like overly simplified example, but, so an employee quits, right? Even hiring people, I just preface this by saying, like, even that's an experiment, right? You think they're going to be a good fit, but you don't know until they're actually in there. So, you hire someone and they quit 6 months later. They give feedback on, like, the culture, what got in the way of them doing their best work, this and that, whatever. As a leader, you can say, well, this person was just a bad culture fit, and that's that. Maybe that's part of the truth, but to have that as the only takeaway from this experiment would be a miss. What else could be true? You might want to then look, okay, well, how was I showing up as a leader? Where's the kernel of truth in some of this constructive feedback? And apply those insights also to whatever you do next.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. And I'm wondering, have you figured out a way to help people have this mind shift? Because, it's really about it could be as simple as basically when you don't get what you want or expect, you should ask, well, what did I though learn, right? I mean, even if I didn't get what I wanted, what did I learn? And I'm wondering, have you found a way to kind of help make or aid people in having that mind shift about their definition of failure?
I think it's a lot of holding up the mirror. Like you don't just change someone's mindset. That's why, the way I work with people, the executive coaching, it's long-term partnership. I typically work with people for at least a year because transformation, which, I define as changing the way you show up, identity, and changing how you think, your beliefs takes time. I guess the kernel of it is people can see things in all or nothing, black and white, right? Like I either failed or I succeeded. And if I succeeded, I'm good. And if I failed, I'm bad. And a lot of, I think what I'm doing with coaching and with clients is it is not binary like this. There's so much nuance. We're working in the gray. And so, yes, this, I don't know, launch or whatever it is that they're working on may have failed, but also, what is the bright spot in that? What is the lesson? What is the silver lining? Um, and I think a powerful reframe is these lessons will are moving me a step closer to creating something better than I can imagine. Without these lessons, I am in some ways I'm operating blind or I have unknown unknowns. And so even though they are painful, they are serving me. And I think it's not that this just, blows someone's mind in an instant and all of a sudden, that's how they think and they don't get caught up in failure. But I think it's this repeated practice of taking clients through experiments, having them take these failures or insights, as I like to call them, these lessons, and applying them to the next experiment and being with them on this transformational journey, which is a year plus sometimes, they believe it because they see it happening and working. And they do come to recognize that, yeah, failure is just again, as long as I'm running a tight experiment with quick feedback loops, is just a lesson. And those lessons serve me in creating what I want to create.
Yeah. And then the third point about the gut, I think that's a very valid one as well, because part of it is, I mean, I think the universe is always giving you clues, right? And one of them is your gut. And have you found a way to help people be more in line and listening to their gut? Have you found a way to have people do that?
Well, I also love what you said because I think a mentor of mine used to say that the universe will whisper and then it will scream, yeah, I think my clients will experience this if they ignore the whispers of their gut and then they hear a scream. Um, so here's the thing too with coaching, right? Because I'm never telling a client what to do. And if a client chooses in the beginning to ignore the gut reaction or instinct, um, I can hold up the mirror, but it's their choice. And if they choose that and they have, a suboptimal outcome, right? Because that too is an experiment, that's then their lesson. And so I'm not actually trying to rob people of these important lessons. I think that they sometimes, we learn the most from our failures. That's what really becomes like, I know this in my bones now to be true because I ate dirt once for this and now I know it. Um, and so part of it is just like if they are struggling to listen to their gut, well, creating the container for them to run that experiment and see what happens when you ignore your gut. Um, I think the other thing too to keep in mind is most people that I have worked with want to give people the benefit of the doubt. They want to be and they're asking like, okay, here's what I think is going on, but what else could be true? How else could I potentially support this person or make this relationship or partnership work or whatever the thing is? Um, and you know, I think it's some often comes from a good place. They want to be really sure if they're going to, cut ties with someone or something like that. the way it shows up though sometimes is too much of anything is a bad thing. And I think with folks who tend to not avoid or not want to have these hard conversations because they want to give someone another opportunity, I think what shows up is what's well developed in that person is empathy, consideration, collaboration, all of these things. And what's less developed is maybe being direct, um, explicit, holding maybe a stronger boundary. And it's not that one is better than the other, both are important, but it's maybe about helping the client lean into and further develop what's less developed in them.
I think this is an interesting thing because a lot of times with people, you get to this point where when you've been with them long enough, you're always going to see their true colors, right? And everyone has positive and negatives. I mean, I do, you do, everybody does. And so your choice isn't, can you change those? The choice is, can you live with those? Right? And so when you see the true colors, believe them.
Right.
Right? Because you're not going to change them unless they want to change them internally. So,
Oh, well, so that's
so
also
trust your
such an
gut.
right. Well, that's also such an important thing you just said that you can't change them. I mean, unless they decide they want to change. I think I see this a lot too. It's like, hey, this co-founder, this employee is like problematic in these ways. How do I fix them? And it's like, you can give feedback, but unless they believe that and want to shift that, like, good luck. And if that's the case, then, maybe you need to part ways with them. But yes, what's that saying? When people show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I actually mean,
Yeah.
I mean, just believe it. That's it. But I think where people get in trouble is they want to change it. And that's just not going to happen unless the person wants to change. Because related to something else we're talking about, one thing I've learned is that ultimately people learn by experience, right? They're going back to the whole failure thing. And, as they say, if you want to increase your success rate, well, great, just double your failure rate.
Or it's like with sales too, right? It's like if you want more yeses, you better get ready to hear a bunch more nos.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like the path to yes is littered with a million nos or whatever.
Right. I'm curious, what are three common misperceptions or of what people think about coaches and what they do?
I don't know about all coaches, but I can share, like, I don't know if I would call it a misperception, but something I clarify with people who come to me for coaching is, there's different kinds of coaches. Um, there's what I would call like more accountability type coaches, like, someone who says, I want to create this thing, like make sure I do these things, hold me accountable to doing this thing. Maybe there's a time and a place for that type of coaching. That's not the type of coaching I do. I very much find that to be what I would call like single loop coaching. Like it's just focused on do these actions to create what you want. And I think it's very surface level. It's not real deep change. And I think in those types of situations, the moment you remove the coach, it's back to the status quo. What I'm more interested in is shifting how people think, and like identity, how they show up, so that even when our partnership is done, they are transformed. So they continue creating the results they want. So that's something I sometimes have to explain to people that, I'm not going to be your accountability and manager and be like, did you do what you said you were going to do? Like, I'm not interested in that type of relationship. And I think the people who come to me are better than that. So I'm upfront about that. If they don't do something they said is important to them, I'll get curious about that. Like what got in the way? Is it some underlying belief in this and that? But that's definitely like, I think a perception some people have of coaching, like this is going to be my accountability buddy. And it's not that coaches, I don't hold clients accountable, but I'm not going to be managing what they said they were going to do. I'm going to if they're an adult, I treat all clients like adults. And if they say they're going to do something, I expect that they're going to do it. Um, I think the other thing people maybe don't quite get about coaching is even the smartest, most ambitious, most capable leaders have ways of being, assumptions, and patterns that get in the way of them reaching their full potential. And that's what coaching is for. Coaching doesn't mean, oh, you are deficient and you need to get up to a proficient level. It's really about you are capable. You are doing, you're doing many things right. And also, if you want to create something even better, who do you need to become to create that? And coaching can really help you get there in a more maybe in a more like tighter or a more supported way, more than just kind of hoping for the best on your own. I guess the third thing that comes to mind as well is like the difference with like coaching and therapy. I always say to clients, this is perhaps an oversimplification, but therapy is very much, in my experience through being in therapy is about looking at the past and how is the past impacting how you're showing up today. And coaching is much more about looking at the future and what do you want to create and how, in what ways are you showing up today that's like getting in the way of that, and how can we adjust? And certainly there is some areas where there is like some overlap. I think it's important for clients to know the difference. Many of my clients have, work with me, also have therapists. And I think I've also, in certain instances, have had to say to clients, you know what, I don't think in this context, I'm the best person to support you with this particular problem. I think this is actually would be better served and unpacked with, a clinician or a therapist or something of that sort. So that's another thing I think it's important for people to understand the difference.
So moving forward, what areas of coaching would you like to further explore or perhaps find aha moments in the future in?
What I'm noticing I have curiosity around is, since COVID and everything, things have become very online. I do some of my clients I've never met in person, right? All of my coaching is done online. When I'm in a city that a client's saying, we'll meet, but regularly I'm meeting with people online. And, with AI and its advancements and all this, I certainly have curiosity around, at least not yet. I don't think, AI will replace me, but certainly it can replace a variety of functions that maybe a coach used to be able to do, right? Especially as they get to know you really, really well. And your AI starts to learn your shadows and things like that. What I do think won't change is in-person experiences. And so maybe something I'm noticing, I'm curious or I'm interested in doing more of is facilitation, offsites, right? Group dynamics, things like that are IRL, unless we build robots. But I'm noticing I have some interest in that just because it's different. I've done a bit of it, but I'd like to do more of it.
Interesting. So if you could have lunch, dinner with anyone in your industry or even outside, who would it be and why?
I would love to have dinner with Dr. Julie Gerner. I don't know if you know her, but she's a great Substack that I love. She's, if I believe she's like a performance psychologist. And she always just has the sharpest things to say. And she lives on a farm, from what I understand from Twitter, in like upstate New York, and like does her own thing. And I just admire her work. And I think it would be cool to have dinner with her.
That's interesting. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on this podcast. I had an enjoyable, great conversation with you. I learned quite a bit, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Darshan.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.